These are the plants that people say are impossible. However, they're not impossible. You've just been told the wrong things about them. Hi, my name is Memo. This is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me. It's tropical houseplants. By the end of today's video, I want to be able to give you all the information that I've learned over the years to go from struggling, difficult plants to thriving. So I'm going to go through 5 plant groups today. Think of them more like genera. So for example, I want to talk about Crotons, peace lilies, Calatheas, and also Alocasias and Ferns. Now, before anybody says this, I do understand that there's going to be nuances and different species within these groupings or genera is going to be different. So take some of this advice with a pinch of salt. But what I have found a lot of the times with some of this kind of care that I've been giving these plants is that a lot of the times, most of this will apply to quite a large chunk of the genera. Again, there's always going to be outliers. And yeah, I just wanted to share it with you, my audience, because if I can help you learn a bit faster than I did, that's my task done for the day. But in essence, what I want to do is show you a key shift for each one of these plant types that you could do to really make your journey with them and your care with them a lot easier and more fulfilling. So you saw I only had 3 plants to show you. Some of the others I've done as pictures. The Alocasia, which is the first one that I want to touch on today, is one that I don't have any more of these large Alocasias in my care, just purely because I don't have the space for them, not because I've not been able to grow them. And note the difference that I said here. This is what I've learned when it comes to the larger form Alocasias, not necessarily the dual form Alocasias. I'm still learning a bit with that. So for the larger form Alocasias, and you can see here some examples, which hopefully I'll be able to find some pictures of both my Alocasia miscaliciana, sometimes known as the Frydect. I'm not going to touch on that one. And also my Alocasia gagiana variegata. And if I can find an image of my Alocasia odorata, I think it is, the kind of usual kind of very green kind of elephant ear Alocasia are added here as well, because that became the size of a tree and I struggled to give that away at some point because I'm just like, who wants this ginormously happy plant? Here you go. And I'm starting off strong and controversial with this one because everybody's going to hate me. But look, this has been what has worked for me. I'm not going to sit here and chew my words because people do not like moisture meters. Sorry about it. So, and this is an interesting one because this is something I think I heard for the first time ever years ago, years and years and years ago, when I was first starting off on my kind of newer houseplant journey from Kaylee Ellen on her channel, actually. And this is when she still had loads of Alocasias as well. This is when she was still filming from her flat. I think it was a flat. But yeah, and this has done me trumps every single time. So if you don't have a moisture meter and you're trying to do your Alocasias and you're struggling, my little suggestion to you is go out and purchase just a bog standard moisture meter that you can shove it into the soil. I tend to find the one with the 1 prong easier than the one with the 2 prongs, but there is a whole host of them out there. They're not that expensive. You do you, boo. But the thing with a lot of the Alocasias, and the reason why I'm showing the moisture meter, and I'll get to what I kind of learned from Kaylee and kind of what has worked for me as well over the years, is that the watering is going to be your biggest challenge. This is why a lot of the times Alocasias can be really challenging. It was interesting last year, and I've mentioned this before when I was speaking to Jacob, who runs, who's one of the owners actually of Grow Tropicals, and I've still got my voucher code if anybody's in the spring looking to buy some plants from Grow Tropicals. You can get 10% off by using my code. And it is that he was saying that a lot of people struggle with Alocasias, and he was giving me feedback that he was getting from customers going, oh, I've done all these things and it was really happy in the summer. What has happened in the winter is that people didn't adjust their watering. the watering tends to be the biggest issue when it comes to keeping an alocasia happy, because a lot of the times the biggest issue that most of us will face with alocasias is you gain a leaf, you lose a leaf. And that's if you're managing to gain a leaf. Sometimes you're just losing leaves. So watering is crucial. And if you think about where these plants grow, and I've learned a lot over the years rather than just kind of Kaylee's original advice, which all ties in, it makes sense, is that a lot of the alocasias, especially the large ones, remember I'm talking about the large form alocasias now, not the jewel type, they tend to be more kind of almost marginal plants. So they're near kind of waterways, essentially. So they do need a lot of moisture, and people, that's where it starts getting tricky. What is the big thing that I've learned? And it's not rocket science, and I know other people have talked about this as well. Use your moisture meter, and there's a reason why I'm saying this. You need to be as exact as possible. Learn how to use a moisture meter properly, put it in at different stages or at different locations within the soil, not just one, not to the side, sometimes in the middle. So stab it in a few places and get an average reading. So with most moisture meters, you'll get a section that is dry. Mine goes from 1 to 3, and then from 4 to 7 is moist, and from 8 until 10 is wet. Now, and this is going to take some time for you to kind of start learning this on each one of your individual plants. I'm sorry to tell you this. But what has worked for me to both keep a leaf and get a leaf, so they get bigger and bushier plants, and also to keep it happy long term is, and this is what I mean, you're going to need to monitor it for a good few weeks or even months in the beginning until you get the gist. And after that, it's very much plug and play. There's going to be some seasonal adjustments that you're going to need to do. But if you follow this, even during the seasons, that will help you. So every time you need to water your alocasia, shove this in the soil. And for me, if it's on 4, which is the last little number on average, again, stabbing in different places, if it's on 4, which is the last number on moist, before it goes to 3, which is the last number of dry, that's when I water. It needs to get to 4. So I don't know how else better to describe it, and it is almost exactly that, basically. Every time I have done that technique, results. And I know that's a very basic thing about alocasias. The other little bonus tip that I will give you here is whatever light you think you are giving your alocasia, especially if it's struggling, you are not giving it enough. Not by a long shot. So brighter light than you think it needs. Am I saying to fry it the same way that you would if you place it in the same place where you would have your cacti? No. But it's not far off, to be fair. You don't need direct sun on these plants 12 hours a day. That's not what I'm saying. But they can handle like 1 or 2 hours of direct sun without much issue. The large form alocasias I'm talking about now. But yes, do this with your moisture meter. Thank me later. And I know I'm going to get hate in the comments down below, but I'll stand by this until the day that I die, because it doesn't matter what everybody else tells me. If this is the thing that has worked for me time and time again, this is what's worked for me. This is very simple, really. And the last little bit of nugget of information that you need to remember with this, a lot of the times alocasia, if it's not the main root, if you look at some of the kind of secondary roots that come off the main roots, they are very fine roots. They are very sensitive to fluctuation. So this is probably one more of those plants that is just like evenly moist. That means nothing to anybody. Constant even moisture means nothing to anybody ever. So this is what I'm saying. If you can keep it so that it's just before it dips into the dry section of your moisture meter, you're fine. And the reason why I was saying you're going to need some time is monitor that for like 1 month, 2 months. And then you'll see roughly, oh, okay, this alocasia at about 6 or 7 days at this stage is when I need to be checking before I water. Every time checking before I water. And then potentially watering. And then you'll get the gist of it. You'll be like, okay, that alocasia roughly in the winter needs water every 7 days. And then roughly in the summer, it needs water every 3 to 4 days. That's it. And it can almost become a bit of a schedule. Again, always test. So easy. The moment that you get that and the lighting right, done. Completely fine. Shall we move on to the spicy one of everything? So let's talk about Calatheas. So this one, I can never remember this one. So this is the Calathea rosea picta silver plate. For the people that were wondering how this was doing, absolutely a stonking amazing. Absolutely stonking amazing. So a lot of the times people struggle with alocasias because they struggle with crispy tips, they struggle with the humidity, and this is the reality that I want you to take away from this. It's not always the humidity. A lot of the times it isn't the humidity. It's more about the moisture within the soil. And I've talked about this before. The reality with a lot of these plants is if you dial in, and this is the challenge, if you dial in the watering to most plants, even the ones that need a lot of humidity, the humidity almost becomes secondary because they can get all of the moisture that they need from their soil. The challenge there is getting it just right. And I will say it's not the easiest thing in the world. If anything, it is very hard to get it just right, especially for plants that you assume need a high level of humidity. But that's the big problem with this type of plant is that a lot of people will over focus on humidity. They're just like, but I've given you the humidity, and they don't focus on anything else. I would tell you, take a step back, and the big tip on this one and the big thing that I've learned is give it chunkier soil than you ever thought was kind of appropriate for Calatheas. And I'm going to be trialing a test this summer. I haven't done it just yet. I'm hoping like during the Easter break next weekend I might start it. Is I'm going to try growing some of my Calatheas in just orchid bark. I'm literally like throw all of the rules out about moisture retention soil and they need all of this. Yes, these are ground dwelling tropical plants. However, you need to remember that the ground in the forest with all the debris that's falling from the trees is actually quite airy a lot of the time. So that is something that has made a big difference. I've got them in pots with air holes. I let them dry out pretty much, if not fully. Again, if you're going to be using a moisture meter, I won't let it go down to 1. But if it gets down to 3 or 2, that's probably around the time that I'll water. Absolutely fine. I'm also watering these with regular tap water. Granted, I am adding in fertilizer within that water that helps to remove some of those salts that are going to cause issues within my Calatheas. I'm also not particularly fussed about brown crispy tips on some of my plants because the rest of the plant is fine. It's just a bit of a sensitive thing because the cell level at the very tip of the leaves is very thin. So that's where you can get salt buildup. If you're having real issues with that, there are other options I'm not going to talk about here. But yeah, do something like that because ironically enough, a lot of the times what I'm hearing from people that are struggling with Calatheas, and I know there's a lot of people that do really well in my comments with Calatheas because they always try to remind us of this, please do share down below. If for no other reason, because you're always really good at explaining how you are growing your Calatheas, and it's really interesting to see that actually some of these plants can be more adaptable than we ever give them credit for because so many people are growing them in so many different conditions with so much different care and they are doing okay. Granted, I know there's the same amount of people that are not doing okay with this, but what I'm hoping to give you here in terms of what I've learned is a way to optimize it as much as possible even if you don't want to go out of your way for these plants. So yes, chunky soil, but, and this is what you're going to be giving up with this, is you're going to be watering that more frequently. Because obviously if it's moisture retentive soil, you probably won't water this more than once every 2 or 3 weeks. But if it's really chunky soil, you will be watering this more frequently because it will be drying out more frequently. And I hear you say about the humidity, and you were saying about the watering. As long as the water is there when they need it, the humidity is secondary at that point. So that's the thing, is just don't let them stay dry, bone dry for days on end. Otherwise it will desiccate. Think of it, very thin leaves, probably thinner than most of your other houseplants. So you need to kind of balance that out. But yes, my big tip with this is chunky soil mix, believe it or not. And you need to remember again, and I've done a whole video about why kind of roots need oxygen and it's very rarely the overwatering. Making sure that those roots are getting oxygen is key on this point as well, because if it's not getting oxygen and you're constantly keeping it wet, and you're doing all of these things, so you're constantly keeping it wet and it's a moisture retentive soil and you've also got loads of humidity, you are drowning and suffocating your plant at the same time because it's just like, I can't get oxygen from anywhere. I like there is no air anymore because the air is dense with humidity. I'm waterlogged down here. I struggle and I die. Treat them like hemi-epiphytes. New words. So not a traditional epiphyte, but something in between what you would consider to be a very, very boggy loving plant, like very wet plant, and an epiphyte. Somewhere in between is where these actually do great. And let's go on to one type of plant, and I'm going to give you the most extreme example. I don't have this anymore, again, because it got so big that I had to get rid of it. And by get rid of it, I think this is still with one of my friends, and they are not doing anything special other than just following the instructions that I gave them, and this plant is even bigger for them at the moment. But I'll see if I can find a picture of when I had it, basically. So Maidenhair fern. Let's talk ferns. And obviously there is going to be some nuance to this, and I specifically chose Maidenhair fern for this one because this is the one that a lot of people struggle with when it comes to crisping of leaves, all of these things. There are other types of ferns, and again, I will show you some of the epiphytic ferns that I find super easy. So one example is here, and that's what I wanted to show you. It is growing on a mount. This is a crocodile fern that is truly the happiest a fern has ever been in my space, basically. So super, super, super happy leaves. I don't ever lose leaves. I'm constantly getting new leaves on this. This plant is meant to be grown epiphytically, and you can see by how happy it is in its mount. I've also got right here, and again, people will be sick and tired of me showing this, a blue star fern epiphytically. Obviously, I'm not going to show you a staghorn fern, but a staghorn fern is the same. So these plants actually enhance what I have learned about even something as simple as the maidenhair fern. So what do people get wrong most of the time with maidenhair ferns? Underwatering or overwatering? It's one of the two. It's always one of the two. And it's really difficult because you're just sitting there going, but I'm giving you loads of water and it's not working. But I'm giving you less water and it's still not working. These are plants that still need oxygen to their roots, because a lot of the time, especially us in the northern hemisphere, that we might have colder, wetter conditions for larger chunks of the year, we look at ferns in the ground in our location and where they are and how wet they are and all these things, and we make certain assumptions. These ferns that we're growing in our house, by and large, if I'm not mistaken, most of the time, they are tropical ferns. Their conditions are different from the conditions that we are seeing our local ferns in. That is highly, highly important. So these plants still need aeration to their roots. Now, what did I do to solve that big problem? And there's going to be some investment here, especially if you've never done semi-hydro. And this was actually a suggestion that I've learned from one of you lovely people. And it basically just made my life easier. I had achieved a very happy, very large, very kind of pristine looking maidenhair fern for a long period of time without this tip. It just meant more work on my point. But what I'm going to tell you now is what made it just easier. So you get a maidenhair fern. It's usually going to be in a pot. Do not try to tease out any of that soil from the maidenhair fern. Ferns have got very fine roots. You are going to stress it out to the nth degree. Leave it within the soil media that you've got from the grower. Now, taking that plant, and I'm going to use this as an example because I don't have any other example to show you. Say this is in a pot. Say this was just the root mass within that soil. I would then put it in a slightly bigger pot, maybe leaving like an inch or two around it, like that, and then fill in the rest of that space around it and underneath it with something like pon. And I'm specifically saying pon here, lechuza pon or whatever semi-hydro makes, not leca, unless you can get very, very small leca. It needs to be smaller particles. And then when you've done all of that, sit it on a tray, a small tray of water as well. So obviously make sure that there is enough pon at the bottom so that you're not getting the soil being constantly touching the soil. But that in itself gives this plant a load of aeration, and I know you'd be worried because you're just like, but there's soil and there's pond and all these things. Don't worry about it, because you're never realistically going to be watering. You might have to do it the first time, but at that point onwards, you just need to make sure that that reservoir has always got water in it, and it will wick up just the right amount of water, so it will hit the bottom of the roots, it will hit that soil, and it will hit it all around. And you would be surprised when I kind of removed this plant that I had within this setup with all the leca, a lot of the fern roots had already grown into the leca, but you can see now why I'm talking about smaller particles, and then it's a set it and forget it. The other one little bonus tip that I will say about maidenhair ferns and about ferns in general, especially the tropical ferns that we are growing as houseplants, whatever you think the light that you're giving it is right, especially if it's struggling, bump it up. Bump it up. My maidenhair fern, so the people that have been here for a while, and I haven't just grown it in here, I've also grown it in the house, but I'll tell you the example in here so you can kind of understand it, was right up the top there. Right above is glass. That's how much light the maidenhair fern was getting, and it was growing like the clappers. 9 times out of 10, whatever low light you are giving your fern, it is nowhere near enough. Bright, indirect light. It still needs to be indirect. Ferns really will not take direct light, unlike the alocasias that we were talking about before, but bright, indirect light, absolutely perfect and ideal for a lot of these ferns. You will see explosive growth. Yes, what I was talking about before, you're probably going to need to fill that reservoir a bit more often, but as long as you remember to do that, and by reservoir, it can literally just be just a regular kind of drip tray. It doesn't need to be anything too major. You don't also want it to be too deep, because remember what I was talking about, hopefully that's coming up in camera. You can see where that soil level is. You do not want the water to be touching that soil level. It needs to be below it. It needs to only be touching the semi-hydro media, and then you're fine. Shall we move on to a plant that is very triggering for a lot of people? The humble croton. And I can't remember which specific croton this is. I'll put it at the top there. And you might notice that it's going to whoop through the whoop, mainly because I don't rotate this. So you can tell where the window usually is in relation to this plant, but I'll show you from the front so you can kind of see. And you can see I started this off as a very small plant. You can still see that I've got it in a clear pot with loads of air holes as well. So the biggest thing, and I know a lot of people are triggered with this, and this is me not trying to convince you to go out and buy a croton, because I know a lot of people are sitting there in the corner already just by me mentioning this rocking, just going, never again, never again. But if you ever do want to try a croton again, let me tell you what has worked for me. And let me first start off by saying about what most people do wrong with these plants. Because a lot of the times you will lose leaves on these plants like that. It will just constantly keep dropping leaves. Even worse than some of the ficuses out there that people are just like, if you move it ever so slightly, it will just dump all of its leaves. This is another one that has got the same reputation. And if you've ever tried growing one, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But I think, and based on just my experience and why I have always had great time with crotons versus a lot of other people out there. Most people underwater these to the nth degree. And it's interesting because this is not a plant that people instantly relate. It's not like a Calathea. It's not like a fern. This is not a plant that people relate to needing an awful lot of moisture all of the time. In my humblest of opinions and experiences with these plants, always growing them super happy and super large, they are thirsty. They are so thirsty. Not to the same level of the fern. I'm not going to tell you to be doing the same thing that we were talking about with the pond with this one, but if your croton has ever struggled and you've not really been too sure what you're doing and you're just like, but I'm letting it dry out and I'm not giving it any root rot, yes, but, and this is the thing that's really challenging with this plant, I'll see if it can maybe focus so you might be able to see how fine those roots are. And you can see the roots haven't filled out this pot yet. This plant gets watered, especially now coming into this is just early spring. We're not even in full summer yet. This is getting watered every 4 days at this point in time. In the winter, this was getting watered every 5 to 6 days. That should tell you something, because for a lot of people, they'd be like, oh, croton, blah, 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 blah. I'll water it a lot less. Thirsty, 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 thirsty plants, even more so than you would imagine. This is definitely a plant that I do not want going bone dry ever, ever. That will stress out this plant to the nth degree. You won't get any new leaves. And again, the other big tip with most crotons, especially, I know some places in the States, they do grow these in the ground as garden plants. These plants can get so much light. can get so much light. You'll get some of the coloration a bit more. You'll start getting the bigger leaves. You can see how the leaves have got bigger and bigger and bigger as this plant is kind of enlarging basically. But I'm constantly getting new leaves on this plant at the moment, and you can see it struggled for a bit when it was smaller here because it was probably about this size for about 2 years, because I got so much into my head since the last time I grew a croton, which is the very beginning of my plant journey, before I'd kind of consumed so much information online, and I'm just like, oh, well, you know, I need to keep it like towards dry, and I was thinking of this more like an aroid. Absolutely not. This is something that needs an awful lot of moisture. So I do not have, this is not a plant that I've got in the Soil Ninja Anthurium soil mix. This is in a much denser mix. This is a much more moisture retentive mix. I still want to see the roots. I still want to have aeration. The roots still need to breathe. See the video that I was talking about earlier on. But this is a plant that does require even moisture all the time. Even more so, I find, than Alocasias. And even more than Alocasias, this needs bright light. Again, don't fry it like you would your cacti and succulents, although I will say, attempt it, try it for a bit, especially in the winter, and give this as much direct light as possible. Maybe in the summer, if you've got something with a net curtain or something like that over it, that would be fine as well. But even then, you'd be surprised. Thank me later. Do that and thank me later with this, and you will not struggle with your crotons. The moment that I changed and went back to what I was originally doing when I didn't know anything from online, and I just started watering this more frequently and constantly making sure that it had moisture. Again, don't make it boggy. You don't want to rot it out. Super happy. Super happy, super happy, and you still get those beautiful colored leaves. And this is one of the staple houseplants that you could find anywhere around. I know there's a lot of people that are doing less of the like rare and unusual type plants and going back to the more traditional houseplants. This is definitely part of that kind of category. This might be an easy one to do. It's just make sure that it's got enough water, really. And shall we finish on a plant that I also know is quite triggering to most people? To be fair, I think most of these plants on the list are very triggering to a lot of people. If you've got PTSD, I do apologize. Hopefully, if it's too much for you to watch this, you would have clocked off at the beginning of the video. But peace lily. Peace lily. And I was surprised by this because I didn't think that that many people would have issues with peace lilies. This is one that I'm surprised is doing as well as it has done, because I've always found better success with the bigger peace lilies rather than these kind of more dwarf-sized peace lilies. And the people that have been around for a while, a few months now, remember the gift that I was given by somebody, the one and only plant gift that I got this year. But I got a plant gift, it's great. Sorry. From a friend, was around Christmas time, was these tiny, tiny peace lily. And please note how many blooms are still there. We are literally at least 3 to 4 months past when that friend gave me this peace lily, and this was from a supermarket. And not only has it got a whole bunch more blooms, but it is also growing super, super happily. So what makes this kind of difficult in most people's eyes? One would be kind of getting the watering just right. Believe it or not, because I know a lot of people say that this is a really expressive plant and it will flop down when it doesn't have enough water, and I will get to that in just a second. And the other is the blooms. Do not take the fact that mine is blooming as much as it is as gospel. It depends on your plant, it depends on what it's been used to before. So let's touch on the blooms, because that's why a lot of people just like, but I bought this for the bloom. I don't particularly like this plant for the leaves. If you like your big statement houseplants, and I can't remember, I think there's a giant form of a peace lily where the leaves are absolutely stonking huge. That one, even if you don't get any blooms on it, that is a very impressive plant. I know those are slightly trickier to come by, but wow. But with this, a lot of the times you need to remember, much like, if I'm not mistaken, some of the more traditional kind of anthuriums, the ones that they sell in the supermarket, the ones with the colourful bracts and all these things, or the colourful blooms, a lot of the times, and I can't remember if it's gibberellic acid, I might be wrong, I'll see if I can find the name. There is something that they kind of, the growers will put on the plant shortly before it's sold to promote blooming and you get loads of blooms and you always get those plants in bloom because that's what they're counting on the blooms to sell this plant basically. You do not have access to that as well. And also you need to remember, if you've essentially given that plant steroids, think about it in that way, in order to get as many blooms as possible, and all of a sudden your house, it doesn't have those steroids anymore. And some people might be saying, you know what, yours might still have some of that lingering and that's why you're getting blooms. Talk to us again in a year. I hear you. But, and this is what I'm saying, don't always count on the blooms always being there. But there is going to be a point where that kind of steroids, that chemical that they put on there is going to eventually kind of work its way out of the plant system. And if you'd imagine you're just like, you're always on a go, go, go. Imagine like somebody gave you loads of caffeine, go, 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 and you go, 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 and you're doing everything. And at some point you're going to crash. At some point that caffeine is going to leave your system and you're going to need a day or two of like, oh, I feel like death. I did too much. Similar kind of vibes. That is going to drain out of the plant and this plant is going to need a beat. And by beat, I mean maybe a few months or maybe even a year before it just kind of goes, okay, I might want to attempt blooms again, but even if you're doing the right thing, I'm still not going to give you 20 blooms because you're not giving me steroids as you were before. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 blooms, which is more natural for the plant. So that is the one thing. Don't expect loads of blooms at the same time. What I am doing, however, with this plant, as well as my more colorful anthuriums, because I've fallen in love with these plants again now, is I'm putting in a touch of orchid bloom-specific liquid fertilizer in their water every single time that I'm watering them. And I'm talking about a very small amount, like a quarter of what it says on the packaging, basically. Both of these plants have not stopped blooming since I got them. And the colorful anthurium I've had for over a year now, and it's still got loads of blooms. Did it reduce even in the winter? Yes, in the winter I only had 2 blooms on that plant at any given time. Now I'm already seeing in the spring, I'm already getting bloom 3, 4, and 5 starting on the same plant. And usually around the summertime with that anthurium specifically, I'll have at least 6 or 7 blooms on at one time. This, I would imagine, is going to be the same thing. As I said, this might also be the fact that the steroids haven't worked its way out of the system. Now, on to the watering, which is a thing that a lot of people tend to get wrong with this plant. Again, this is bright indirect light. Do not give it medium light. Do not give it bright light. This is definitely bright indirect, maybe towards medium, but you're fine. If you want more blooms, bump up the light. Do not bump down the light, bump up the light for blooms. And you can see here it's already kind of starting to get roots that are coming out the bottom. They're not circling yet. I'm fine with the plant as it is. Now, the thing that I was saying before about the fact that it's surprising that some people find this so challenging because everybody's just like, this is an easy plant, it's expressive, it will flop down. And I'll see if I can find the video that I keep putting on most of my videos about this plant flopping down and you can kind of see it. Yes, it is an expressive plant and yes, it is good for beginners. But if you are no longer just immediately been a beginner and you've maybe had a couple of plants now, you want to avoid that if at all possible, because every time that happens, if you're waiting and you're forcing your plant to flop before you water it every time, you are stressing it out every single time that that is happening. So you need to remember to maybe don't do that. Do that once or twice. And as I said, if you're just starting off and you want to see where the balance is, remember what we were doing with the Alocasias of knowing, I'm not going to tell you to use a moisture meter on this. You do not need to be this exact with this type of plant. However, what I'd say is, again, this is a couple of weeks process. Let this flop once for you, so you know. And take a note of when you last watered it versus what the date is today. So if I watered this a week ago, and 7 days later, today, I saw that this had just flopped and everything got very soft, I'm just like, oh, okay. So when 7 days until it flopped. So the next time I'm going to water, I'm going to try watering it at 6 days or checking to water at 6 days. And you'll find the happy medium as well there. Do not water it too frequently, but water it just before it will flop or maybe a day before that even. Always happy plant, bright, bright light for more blooms and also a touch of that orchid bloom fertilizer within it and you will still be getting loads and loads of blooms. These plants are not so difficult. They can be quite easy if you just do a couple of things differently than you might think you need to. So in terms of some final thoughts about this plant, and you might have seen some repetition in terms of kind of what I've learned and what I'm trying to tell you has worked for me. There's a few things that you can see that are kind of coming up time and time again with some of these more challenging plants. One is you need to be very on it when it comes to moisture. And I'm going to be a bit more blunt with this as well. Like, these are all, by and large, if you're looking at a croton, if you're looking at a peace lily, if you're looking at Calatheas, if you're looking at ferns, alocasias, the reason why they're so challenging, and it's interesting because they're challenging even for the overwaterers out there, these will probably be even more challenging for the underwaterers out there. Part of the entire issue and part of why people might consider these to be slightly challenging plant is their moisture needs. They are slightly higher than other kind of more standard epiphytic plants that don't mind going towards dry, and they won't throw as much of a hissy fit. So if you really cannot commit to that, then I'm saying maybe these plants, you might want to give them a bit of a miss or go into it knowing that these are going to challenge you. Substrate is another thing that's important. We looked at it when we were talking about the ferns and the pond around it. We looked at it when we were talking about the area chunkier soil mix for Calatheas versus the really dense soil mix. We talked about this still being able to get some aeration, and remember the croton that I was talking about, slightly more moisture retaining soil with that one will do you wonders. And the thing that came across from all of these plants, crotons need a lot more light than you think they do. Peace lilies need a lot more light than you think they do. Calatheas, you can kind of give them slightly brighter light, you'd be surprised. Alocasias need a lot more light than you think they do. Ferns need a lot more light than they think they do. So light is also highly important, and a lot of the times actually bumping up the light ever so slightly with these plants, because a lot of these tend to be sold as more medium towards low indirect light. So just bear that in mind. And just to remember, with a lot of these difficult plants, they're not necessarily difficult, they're just less tolerant of inconsistency. They've got very exact needs, and if you think about these, because these plants have been in the market, and they're all just underneath me now here, they've been in the market for so long that people don't question this anymore. If you start using the same mind frame that you do with some of your rarer type plants, when you're just like, okay, I need to be really specific on the care that I give this plant and actually try to replicate their natural environment as much as possible, because obviously it might only be growing in a 1 kilometer area, one place in the world, you never think about this, about your crotons, about your calatheas, about your peace lilies, about your alocasias. Think about that just for a second, and then you'll make the adjustment quite easily and just go, oh yeah, it makes sense, because if they grow there, I've not been doing this. This is why they've not been happy. And my kind of final takeaway thought from this is, these plants, they didn't change. I just stopped fighting what they need, just in order to fit them into a neat box. This is what you need, this is what you get, this is what you need, this is what you get, done. And then they're happy. And this is why we're saying, pinch of salt with this one is, if you're not willing to make those adjustments to your care of these plants, and maybe they're not the right ones for you, that's fine. There's a whole bunch of other plants out there that you could kind of go for. But these things just need that extra little step. It's not a huge step, I don't think. And you will find them a lot easier and a lot more gratifying to grow, and they will get absolutely stinking huge. As you saw from the 2 examples of plants that I don't even own anymore, because they can get large. They can get really large. But yeah, do let me know down below. Did any of this surprise you? Do you have anything that you want to share with the group down below that you've learned over the years about some of these more challenging plants? Do let us all know down below. I'm really curious to see if your kind of experiences are matching mine. If not, that's fine. We can all have different experiences. That's absolutely fine. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.